This film is one of the most inventive documentaries of the year. It's a powerful, emotional story, and it's full of great characters. I look forward to rejoining you in about 90 minutes with Sarah Polley. Now, please enjoy Stories We Tell. Sarah Polley. It's funny, we've been thinking about this film for over a year, but for these people, they've seen it for the first time, and it's such a nice experience to know that people are encountering it. Sarah, people know you as a director of fiction films, like Away From Her, but I know you to have a great love for documentary film, and I'd like you to talk about what brought you to this film. And in conversations we've had before, I take it this isn't just a one-off fluke for you to do a documentary.
Yeah, I mean, I think that documentary has always been my favorite medium, which may be why it took me so long to make one, because I was terrified I was going to make a really bad one. And I mean, as an audience member, I kind of feel with documentary, like even if you see a really bad documentary, it's still really interesting and it's kind of fine, but there was something terrifying about kind of not living up to some of the documentaries I really loved, which, you're never going to feel like you've done that no matter what. But yeah, so I think that, I would love to see myself in the future make more documentaries than fiction narrative films, although I love making fiction narrative films too. I think documentaries are substantially more difficult to make than sort of fictional narrative features. So, I think it takes way more courage, and it's a much more terrifying process because you're never really certain what you have, and I feel like until the last second, it's basically a total mess. And I think that other documentary filmmakers have this experience. It sort of continues to be a mess in your mind in the way another film wouldn't, because you always live with the 1,000 possibilities of what you could have done with the footage. So it's terrifying for a control freak, I think, to make a documentary.
The scene where you told your dad, was that a reenactment, what we were seeing?
That was a reenactment, and so was the conversation I had with Harry at the beginning. And I kind of tried to make those scenes really kind of like almost pantomime-y obvious with filling in the words and stuff as a clue that a lot of what you were seeing were recreations. So the idea of those, in my mind, and this is what's also weird about documentaries, is I think you have a much lesser sense of the impact something will have on an audience than with another kind of film. So in my mind, those things that were obviously recreations, like the Neanderthal discovery or those conversations, would be a twig to the audience that, most of this is a recreation. And then at the end, when I showed myself filming it, that would be, just seeing behind the scenes, not a reveal, but just seeing behind the scenes of the recreations you knew you had been seeing. So it was a big shock to me when people started seeing the film and not knowing that these were recreations at various points, some at the very end of the film, some when I pull back the camera, and some a little earlier than that. So that was a strange part of the process. It was exciting and also slightly worrisome to me because it hadn't actually been the intention. And I guess the way I can explain it happening is, and I have no idea if it worked for you, if you knew early on or later, but it was a strange experience because I think what happens is, lots of documentary filmmakers have recreations in their films. It's certainly not a new device. I think the thing I underestimated is, when you're doing it about your own family, how much your instincts will get that closer, those recreations, than if you were doing it about another subject. So I underestimated how easy it was to kind of fool people about your family. And again, that's been a complicated issue for me because as an audience member in films, and specifically documentaries, I can get my back up a little bit when I feel tricked. And so that wasn't the intention, and it is the result. But I felt I had put in so many clues for people to know that these are recreations, and I was surprised that not many people picked up on those clues. So,
did you ever find out how the reporter found out? And has that reporter seen the film?
Yeah, so I think that in Montreal, it's a pretty close-knit community, film community. Jewish community, and Harry is a really big part of that community. And so he lives in Toronto, but he had lots of connections to that community and found out, I think, that way. Although he could have easily found out, in Toronto as well from people, because I was certainly telling a lot of friends. And he has seen the film, and I hadn't seen him for a really long time until the Toronto Critics dinner where the film won a prize, and he kind of came up to the table and was like, congratulations, like basically like, you wouldn't have got this award if it wasn't for me, because you wouldn't have had to make the movie. But he said, sorry if I caused you a little bit of inconvenience back then, but congratulations. And so he seemed pretty cool about the whole thing. I've never told anybody what his name is, including all of his colleagues who are desperate to know who it is and throw out names, some of which are correct and some of which are not. But I've protected his identity because the truth is he protected that story, whether it was a hard process or not. He actually had the decency to not print it, and that was kind of his job, to print stories like that. So,
if people didn't hear it over there, he was commenting that such a literary movie is your father's remembrance is going to be published.
It's a great thought and one that I hadn't had, so I thank you for it. Because what he actually wrote was much more than what's on screen. Like, that was me sort of taking pieces here and there, and I think that his full text is really beautiful, and it gets a lot more tangential and abstract and poetic, and I actually think I might look at that. I feel like I still haven't made the decision that this is a documentary for public consumption. I mean, it's really strange, like, that big moment where it's like, okay, I'm gonna share it, never really happened. It was kind of like, okay, I've now spent like $15,000 doing these interviews, like those people are gonna be really disappointed if I don't keep going, and that kind of kept happening. And I tried to quit about 3 or 4 times, and luckily my producer and the National Film Board of Canada, it's like a completely different organization that you would ever normally work with, for like, why don't you just take a break, go away and think about it, come back in 7 months, see how you feel. And they kind of just played the slow burn with me, where it was kind of like they kept being so patient and lovely to work with and giving me so much space that you started to feel like you had to just finish it. So I kind of credit them with it ending. But again, like, in terms of thinking of it for public consumption, my idea was maybe this will play on one of the last days of the Toronto Film Festival. Nobody's gonna want to see it because who cares? And then it'll just be done. And I told everybody that when I got them to be interviewed. It was like, my brother was like, I don't know if I want everybody to. I was like, don't worry, no one's gonna see this. Like, who cares? So it's been a really strange process then traveling with the film and doing these Q&As, because it was never really part of the idea of making it. And it's actually thrilling and not at all a negative, which I thought it might be, because generally I'm getting to hear people's crazy family stories, and it's been really a fun part of the process, which I feel like it usually isn't. So I don't regret it at all, but I'm not sure I ever had a moment where I was comfortable with this and decided to do it.
The question was about the use of piano music in the film.
I think because it was about storytelling, and part of the way we wanted to talk about storytelling was including the process of the filmmaking and the nuts and bolts of that. We kind of wanted it to have a silent movie feel. So we found these amazing recordings of this man who had been a very famous silent movie pianist, and his kids, when he was 80 or so, on an age, had decided to record him because he hadn't been recorded before, to make sure they had him. So it's him, many, many years later, probably not at his best, like playing these things he played many, many times and was quite famous for. And there was something about that story and the quality of the playing that for me felt really resonant and appropriate for what we were trying to do, and that constant reminder of, this is us making a movie, this is not the truth, this is very much there's an artifice to this, and to be actually another cue, I thought, to the recreations.
Thank you very much for coming, and thanks especially to Sarah Polley.